Hello, welcome to my channel where I am sharing my perspective on spirituality, God, quantum physics, manifestation, law of attraction, law of assumption, the nature of reality, and non-duality. Of course, these things are all concepts, and while in my reality they are all quote-unquote connected, they're all just concepts. We'll get into that later in other videos, I'm sure. But, like I said, this is all, of course, from my perspective. I like to think that it's as accurate, or I'm as accurate as that I could be, but maybe me talking about this stuff will help someone else. And if nothing else, it is just me getting the stuff that's in my mind out of my mind and into the ether. So, before I get into it though, of course, all the YouTube things, so please like, subscribe for more content from my vantage point. And just for now, think of me as your faceless best friend who you can talk about all the weird things with. The backstory of me, though, is I actually grew up in a really strict and religious household. I grew up Jehovah's Witness, actually, and I was very devout until I was a teenager, and then started drifting. I didn't actually leave the religion until I was in my 20s. And then I went on this self-discovery that turned into, like, my fascination with law of attraction, law of assumption, and then self-inquiry, and then non-duality, and now we're here. Over the course of that, though, I have pretty much been able to explain every single thing that has happened in my life, and it's, when I broke it down, it was actually way simpler. And I imagine that's the way it is for everyone, because life is simple. It only appears to be complicated, and even that is just a perspective. But I remember being 13 and starting to wonder if, like, the ultimate, like, what was the ultimate truth? What is reality? What is this thing that we call life? And if the God that I served was the only true God, which, if you know anything about the religion, you know what I'm talking about, but essentially that is, that's what's practiced, that's what's believed. And when like I said, when I was 13, I got really into, like, metaphysical stuff, so, like, I had crystals and the sage, and, you know, my mom was like, that is devil worship. A lot of Christian households kind of believe that, and it's, I'm not here to say whether it is or it isn't. I don't actively practice that stuff anymore. But, like, I was always interested in it and thought something was wrong with me for being interested in that. Was actually told that something was wrong with me because I was interested in that. And then I started studying other religions, so, like, Catholicism, Judaism, other forms of Christianity, like Baptist, Seventh-day Adventist, stuff like that, Muslim, Islamic beliefs. As I got older, I feel like anybody that, especially if you grow up super religious, as you get older and start trying to, like, discover the world, you tend to, I always say, walk away from God, even though you're not really walking away from God. More so the religion, and for me personally, it was just the community around it that as I got older, I just deemed that stuff unhealthy for me. But for me, that meant walking away from my family too. So my mother used to call me the prodigal child all the time, because when I was 16, I actually started to, like, run away. But in my 20s, I started realizing that I was living in my own bubble, sort of. Like, then the perspective of it was just like, okay, why does this stuff keep happening to me? What is this? Why does this keep happening? what am I doing here? How do I grow here? But you essentially, I realized like, okay, something, it's all got to do with me. And then I became very self-obsessed with trying to figure out my life, which I think is normal. I think it's to a degree that's natural. But I am an overthinker. I have other like I suffered from depression for a really long time. From like when I was a child, then my depression started around like 11, 12 years old, and I wasn't able to cope with that or deal with that until much, much later in life, like recently, and I'm in my 30s now, so, but I was always like really intuitive though, which, again, my upbringing, my environment, it had me thinking that something was wrong with that, like, and when I say really intuitive, like, I could have a dream about something, or a quick vision about something, and then it would happen. And my mom was like, "What do you think? You're psychic? There's something wrong with you." I mean, there's just that. That's the devil. Like like I said, if you grew up in a really hyper religious household, then you may have had that experience, and that is the reason why I'm making this channel, I guess, or like even doing this, because I feel like if that's the environment that you come from and you don't have yourself figured out, carving a lane for yourself can be extremely difficult. It can leave you with low self-esteem and just a horrible self-concept, and you feel lost. But I want to try to help if I can, and in that same token, I know that nothing's wrong, so there's no one really to help, but I do think that if you understood, or that if you saw it from that vantage point, maybe it would give you a different perspective, help you change your state, even though this is all state. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll save that for other videos. But today, I did want to talk about just kind of like who I am. Obviously this channel doesn't show my face or anything like that at all. That's just for personal reasons, because I don't know how much I'm going to share, but I'm an oversharer by nature. So if that, I'm only comfortable oversharing if I know you don't know who I am. So, like I said, your virtual faceless bestie, and we will talk about all the things. My life was like chaotic in my 20s. I feel like a lot of people, especially if you're my generation, your 20s probably was really chaotic because your childhood was probably really chaotic. Fortunately for us, most of our children won't experience that. They have a whole different set of battles that we just didn't have, so. But I look at my life and like, really, even though like I think it's natural to be curious about life and how things work and how things develop, it's usually after something really traumatic happens to you, like horrible heartbreak, or you lose someone, or you lose something, an immense sense of lack comes before you enter into the world of like manifestation, law of attraction, trying to get closer to God, self-inquiry. The two religions that I studied that probably were my favorite as far as like religions go were Buddhism and Hinduism, just because it's mapped out for you. That led me into the world of like Advaita, Neo Advaita, Uh, so yeah, but the Abraham Hicks world. Oh my God, I feel like everybody's heard of Abraham and trying to attract the things that you want. The Brashard community, girl, I want to tell you, I've done it all. I've done it all. Like, you know, trying to like attract things into my life, and I'm not complaining. I have manifested. You can say manifested, even though you're always manifesting, but consciously manifested the life I want, and I hope that maybe hearing me talk about this will help you. It's like it's so random, but it's not, and it's funny that way. I don't know. It's funny that way. But I went like right into like trying to do things, hoping and wishing. I've always been a really big dreamer, and so things that I thought were impossible for me, like big house, loving husband who'd be a great father to my children, living my luxury lifestyle. Like, I had all of that. And one, it wasn't stable. I couldn't keep it because I wasn't secure in it because my self-concept was shit. And two, was it was very like, you can be grateful for something and not understand how something happened to you, and for most people that would be fine, and for me it wasn't. Like, I needed to, because when it falls apart, if I don't understand how it fell apart or why it fell apart, I can't put it back together. And so I'm a very analytical overthinker who prefers to use logic and emotion. I think there's a balance between logic and emotion. I usually don't have that balance. I'm either overly logical and then no emotion, or I'm super emotional and all the logic goes out the window. So, and it works and it doesn't. And even when it doesn't, it's working. I feel like I'm talking in circles, but like I said, I was really depressed. Like, as a kid, I've tried. I don't even want to get into it. Just imagine like everything going left in life. Like, I had all the wrong people around me at this point. I was always sad, and now I'm an adult, and I had kids. I was a pushover. People in my life used to treat me like shit. Like, it was just, and that was my experience with them. Like, bad trust issues. Like, I was SA'd as a kid a lot, which is probably the main, like, cheated on a lot, abused. Like, I was just always struggling in one way or another. And if you spend your entire life struggling, you get to a point where you're like, if you spend your entire life struggling, you get to a point where it's enough. I don't want to deal with this anymore. I don't want to go through this anymore. It doesn't make any sense. Why is this happening? You need an explanation for it, and you want it to change. And so that is pretty much how I got here. After years of like I said, studying different religions, I fell into like the law of attraction, the Abraham Hicks community. Everybody knows who Abraham is. Tried every technique known to man, from like scripting, writing things 33 times, putting your intention into water, vision boards, and some of the stuff does work. Affirmations were always affirming, so I don't really count affirmations as a technique. That's just a natural byproduct of life, I feel like. But that's when I realized all these things are just states. Like, I I don't like to say that I cured my depression because I know depression is also a state, but having left that state, that was my primary state, and for me to now live a life where that is no longer my primary state, like, yeah, I'll get, like, sad, like everybody does. Like, every single day is obviously not perfect, and even, I can't even say that because every day is perfect, but some days you just feel like shit, you know what I mean? And so, and there's no reason for it. Like, there's no, you can say there is, you can point out a reason, and you can fix that thing. But I think that, again, that's just human nature. Like, we want to fix things. We find a problem, solve the problem, and create a new problem. That's just, it's a constant cycle. Like, it doesn't end. There's no way to stop it. And so when I started, like, self-inquiry, I got really into, like, quantum physics, non-duality. They're all concepts. Like, none of it means anything at all. Everything is so empty until we give meaning to it. And so, and then that meaning that you give to something usually stems from a belief or conditioning or your environment, like something that you've repeatedly seen or been showed. So for you to try to break those cycles or change those states, while it is extremely easy to do that, a lot of times it's easier said than done. And so I found, when I found myself in a position to kind of, like, find that stability, it was not easy. I literally cut everybody off. Some friends I cut off just because I needed to be alone, and others because they were genuinely just not good people for me. Like, there are some people that thrive in negative environments, like they're pessimist, right? So they always talking shit about the next person. They don't, like, they're just not positive people overall. They don't, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not, if you're a pessimist, you're a pessimist. But imagine being an optimist, empathic, introverted person who is constantly surrounded by that, who was always sad. Like, and when I say constantly surrounded by that, my entire family, especially my mother's side, because I didn't know my father until I was almost 30, but my mother's family, like on my mother's side, that, like, there's so much trauma and so much just, we won't even go there. But I feel that's, there's so many things that, like, you deserve to have a good life. If nobody's told you that, you deserve to have a good life. You are allowed to give yourself that. Even if it's not something that you can physically see right now. Circumstances don't matter. We'll get into that later too. But, like, even if it's not something that you can't physically see, you can give that to yourself, like, in your mind, in your heart. Now, of course, I know the non-duality kids are like, you're not doing that. And I know you're not doing it. But something is doing it. I mean, nothing is doing it. But it appears as if something is doing it. It's impossible to have this conversation literally without talking in circles, because but it is the nature of things to go in a circle, because it's not moving at all, and it is so unexplainable and yet explainable. And I can't explain that. But we're going to try, and that is what this channel is about. Not even so much that we're going to try to explain it, but I feel like these conversations need to be had, because there is no one thing. There is one thing, but in the one, like, especially if if you're a non-duality, self-inquiry kid, like, it's all happening at once. And there's nothing outside of you that's happening at all. You're not even happening at all. It's so, like, it's mind blowing. Like, it's an incredible thing to think about because it can't be understood. It can't be understood. It can't be. But I love to talk about it. And it was so funny because after, okay, so I'm talking about like law of attraction, the Abraham Hicks, the Bashar's, the Sets. So, like, if you know who that is, you know who that is. If you don't, let me just sum it up for you real quick. These are spiritual, I can, even Neville Goddard too, spiritual teachers that have based their teaching on the premise that you are creating your own reality, and that is very true. You are, the person lives in a bubble of itself. There's nowhere else to go. There's nothing else to do. Nothing is going to change except for your perspective. The perspective in like, it's all the same. Like, there's no difference between me and you. You're not even, I'm not even talking to anybody right now. I mean, obviously I'm not talking to anybody right now. I'm sitting in my room. This is awkward as hell. I'm like rambling into this microphone about the nature of reality. It's probably hard to believe because you can't even see my face. And for now, it's just the way I feel comfortable doing this. Because I know it seems crazy. Everything that I'm going to talk about here is going to sound insane to most people. Unbelievable to others. But I gotta say it anyway. So I'm gonna say it anyway. I've had this channel for a while. This is like one of 3 YouTube channels for me. I don't post on any of them. All of the other ones have my face on them. But this is where I decided to have this conversation. So this is where I'm gonna have this conversation. And just rambling. But yeah, no. So and then, I went through like every spiritual like thing you can think of, like especially in the spiritual community, law of attraction, Neville Goddard community, law of assumption. It kind of tailors, like once you find that, once you get there, if you go deep enough, you'll end up at self-inquiry. Like, for me, the primary speakers for me are on my non-dual journey, and I'm using air quotes because there's no such thing. But like Moji's, the Rupert Spears, the Francis Lucille's, I love Francis, and I still listen to that content. I mean, obviously not anywhere near as much as I used to. I think that's just a natural byproduct. Like, after you reach a certain point, that just kind of tailors off, and you don't listen so much anymore, because it's kind of like, okay, I'm here, I understand it, like, I don't need to constantly saturate my mind with this, because it's already saturated, like, it's done. But, and like I said, this is all about nothing. So I do want to post videos talking about the law of assumption, the law of attraction, how to create your own reality, manifestation, all these concepts that I've learned along the way, because they're all just concepts, and non-duality. And like I said, these things aren't connected. Like, nothing is really connected, because it's all the same thing. So there's just a million different ways to say one thing. But yeah, like I said, maybe it interests you. Maybe you're just bored and you found this by accident. Maybe you're trying to manifest something for a decade and it hasn't happened. Maybe you've been stuck in this perpetual loop of self-inquiry which, by the way, I don't discourage anything. I don't think anything is right or wrong with any of these things. Like I said, I love these things in my personal bubble of reality, that all of these things tend to exist. They exist outside of my personal bubble of reality, but you know what I mean. And it's so hard to talk. Like, it's impossible to speak in a non-dual way because we are dualism. Like, it's not you when you see these like teachers and these speakers that like talk about how there's no me and they don't exist. There is no me and they don't exist. But it's not in a conceptual kind of way. And I think that for a lot, especially at the entrance of that journey, we see it so conceptually. Like, it doesn't matter at all. Nothing does, really. But there is a way to get everything you want. Like, there is a way for you to create the life of your dreams and for you to have, and it's so